What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for another episode of Ben Builds with Joe and our 1/48 scale Tamiya Skyray. I'm super excited to jump in on this kit. We did a lot of work last episode. I now have black paint so I can go ahead and work on the painting of the cockpit. I picked up some Mission Models thinner so I can go ahead and thin out the top coat, the insignia white and the gold gray. And then of course I did end up picking up some additional glue. Now you know I use a lot of the quick setting Tamiya, but I actually prefer the regular, just extra thin Tamiya. It seems to bond better, and I picked up a little bit of that because I was out. So we are ready to go ahead and jump into the first time lapse here, guys. We're just going to jump in and we're going to go ahead and do some painting. Now, I love how the seat has turned out. I've added some extra pieces here and there, made it a little bit more lived in, and I think it looks okay. I also drilled out the shell ejection ports here on the wings, so that is good. And the cockpit is coming along. I added in some switches and some boxes, and I put some wires here on the front hood. So I'm ready to go ahead and start painting. But of course, we need to go ahead and prime as well. Most of the interior of the cockpit is going to be painted in a dark gold gray. Unfortunately, I realize now that I actually don't have dark gold gray. So we're going to have to go ahead and make our own because none of the hobby stores in my area carry any of it. They're just out. For that, we're going to go ahead and use some Tamiya flat white. We're going to use some Sky Gray by Tamiya, and we're going to use some JN Gray. That's going to hopefully give us at least a good looking gold gray. Then we can darken it down just a little bit with some neutral gray, and that should give us hopefully a good approximation of dark gold gray. May not be perfect, but it's going to be okay. So let's go ahead and start mixing this up and see if I can't make something look a little bit closer than what I have. But you know what? This is always fun to try to mix up paint. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. We're going to do mostly flat white, just a little bit of Sky Gray, and then we'll do a little bit of just a drop or two of that JN Gray. So let's go ahead and mix it up and then add a little bit of neutral gray and see what we come up with. All right, and as you can see, we do have something that looks like a dark gray. It's not exactly perfect, but I think it's going to work just fine. I've compared it to a paint chip I found online, and there's enough of a similarity where you get the idea. Again, it would have been way easier had I actually had dark gold gray, but like I said, every single hobby store in my area, which are only like 2, none of them had the color. And I didn't want to order something online and pay a ton of shipping. So instead, I just decided, let's just make our own. And I think it looks okay. Like I said, not perfect, but it's close enough for our work. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to our first time lapse here, and this is where it's going to get fun, guys. We're going to go ahead and prime everything. We're going to use a white Finalizing primer. We're going to come back after that is dry, and then we're going to apply our custom-made dark gold gray. Once that is done, we'll come back in and we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing with some Sky Gray, kind of pop some of those details there on the side consoles, and then we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of detail painting. I know a couple of switches here and there might need a little bit of some added paint, like maybe red or something. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to jump in, we're going to get this thing rolling, have some fun, do some painting. We'll be right back and I'll show you what we come up with. All right, so we are back, and I gotta say, this cockpit is looking okay. Not exactly perfect, but I'm loving it. It's a very, very fun project to go ahead and work on. And now we're gonna go ahead and do even more detailing. So one of the things I like to go ahead and add into some of these jet fighters is an oxygen hose for the pilot. Now I've seen in my references that there is a little bit of an opening there on the rear side of the left console, and I think Tamiya has gone ahead and molded that in place. So we can go ahead and open it up with my X-Acto knife, drill it out with my pin vise, and we should have, I'm hoping, a nice little opening to go ahead and drop in a homemade oxygen hose. I did the same thing for my Cougar build and also for my Fury build. And I think it looks really kind of fun. It changes up things, and I think if I can go ahead and pull this off, it's going to add a little bit of extra flavor, a little bit extra spice there in the cockpit. And that's what I want to go for anyway. So I think it's going to be a good move to make. Just real slow, bit by bit, very gentle pressure, and we should go ahead and poke our way through. And that is that. Then we go ahead and take our X-Acto knife and clean up the edges, make sure there's no burrs kind of hanging out there. And then we should go ahead and see what we can fit inside for our wire. Now I did make up a real quick example using 0.3mm solder, and that would be really, really nice. But the problem is solder is not always as forgiving as I would like it to be. If you flex it or you pose it too much, you will end up breaking the piece of solder, and then, well, there goes your oxygen hose. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and use something a little bit more substantial. Now, I don't know what gauge this wire is, but I've had this in my drawer for years. You might have seen it come up here and there on different builds. We're going to go ahead and use this same wire, and we're going to make something a little bit more beefy. So to do that, we're going to make a loop in one end of it. We're going to put that through my awl and my pin vise, hook the other end into my X-Acto knife holder, and we're just going to spin it. And this is going to go ahead and compress it and give us a really cool looking, I'm hoping, braided hose effect, so that we can go ahead and pose that, mold that to what we want, and then glue it down inside the cockpit and drape it over the seat. So that should be pretty cool. So let's go ahead now and test fit it into that opening and see how it looks. So there, yeah, I think that looks good. We have a general idea how this is going to look. It's going to drape up and over the end of the seat and drop down into the seat pan. And I can go ahead and cut that, make it a little shorter. I think we'll be good to go ahead and paint that up and glue it in. But of course, before I do any of that, I need to go ahead and make some seat belts. And that is going to be kind of rough because I don't really do seat belts all that often. I'm also going to do a little bit of detail painting here for this pull cord on the top of the ejection seat. I've seen pictures of it being a solid color like black, gray. I've seen yellow and black stripes. I decided to go ahead and go with red because I've seen that before, and I think it kind of stands out and very striking for that cockpit. So I think let's go ahead and jump into our second time lapse. Let's go ahead and overcoat everything with a gloss coat. We're going to do a little bit of weathering using some Tamiya panel liners. And then I want to go ahead and make some seat belts. I don't want to bore you guys too much with it, but I'm going to use solder wire for the buckles and for the clasps, and I'm going to be using some Tamiya tape for the actual belts. I'm going to attempt to make something that looks close to my line drawings from my references. I can't say they're going to be perfect though, but that is my plan. Then I'll go ahead and get them installed, paint them up, get in that hose, and well, we'll see how it turns out. So on with it, guys. Let's get this gloss coated and move forward. Alright guys, so here we go. This is a cockpit as it stands right now. I wanted to go ahead and just kind of show you guys what it looks like if we don't go ahead and paint the seatbelts. They're actually not too bad, but I've seen a lot of reference photos that show them to be a bit of like an olive drab color. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. I want to go ahead and paint the belts in olive drab. Then we can use a different olive drab on the hose for the oxygen as well. I'm just going to use some plain old Vallejo olive drab, nothing fancy. I made a very diluted mixture and I'm using it almost like a wash. Kind of washing over the seatbelts and is tinting them down in nice olive drab color. So it looks a little bit worn, it looks used, and it's not perfect, but I like it. I think it's going to be great. I'll also go ahead and paint the oxygen hose a different color olive drab. I'm going to go a little darker so it stands out from the gray and from the seatbelts as well. I want to make that kind of pop because I like adding a little bit of extra detail, and I think with that oxygen hose, with the seatbelts the way they are, I think it's going to be a really interesting looking cockpit. Eventually I'll come back and I'll add a little bit of Tamiya panel liners just to go ahead and make those look a bit more 3D to give them some shadow and to make them really pop. But otherwise, yeah, the cockpit's coming together. I'm super happy with how this has turned out so far. I do think we need to go ahead and add in the instrument panel. I did put a decal on the instrument panel itself. I don't necessarily like how that's turned out. I think it would be much better if I had a photo etched piece, but you know what? It's okay. You're not really going to see a whole lot of it. It's going to be buried underneath the front windshield coping and it's going to be tucked back in there. So you're not really going to notice it all that much. Now, I have to say also that front kind of coping there underneath the windscreen, that works really, really well and it fits perfectly. But I don't want to go ahead and glue it down just yet because if you notice, there's an opening right there on top of it, and that's actually supposed to be for a clear part. There's a projector gun sight that's installed underneath that front coping, and if I go ahead and glue that in, and if I hit this with a flat coat, which I do intend on doing, it might kind of mute that. I don't think it'll look as good or as shiny. So we're going to go ahead and just leave that off for now. We'll come back next episode and we'll play around with that. So I think we're going to be good for today, guys. I am loving this build. It is so much fun to build something Cold War. And of course, it is always a good time on the bench building along with my buddy Joe. If you haven't subscribed to Joe, make sure to go over to Mad Genius Productions, check out his videos, drop him a thumbs up. His Skyray is looking awesome. And until our next episode, you guys know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. And we'll see you back here on episode number 4 for Ben Builds with Joe and our 1/48 scale F4D-1 Skyray by Tamiya. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. We'll see you back here soon. Take care and go have some fun.